real sounds of Africa there to once again kick off our World Football Phone-In. This morning we're talking football in Africa and football in South America and players from those two regions playing in our leagues over here. The number to call if you'd like to join in the conversation is 08085 909 693. 08085 909 693. You can text us on 85058 or email upallnight@bbc.co.uk. Representing the continent of Africa, we've got the Oracle of African football, Mark Gleeson, our Springbokker Junior. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for that wonderful intro.
No, it's always a pleasure, especially when it allows me to say representing the half continent of South America. You see what I did there, Tim? Is the Legentino, Tim Vickery. Good morning.
Yeah, you might call it a half continent, but don't try and paint it. It's very, very big indeed.
I'll run out of paint, won't I? I'll run out pretty quickly.
Indeed, yeah. You start at the top, I start at the bottom. We will never meet in the middle.
Oh, no. You and Mark won't meet in the middle because there's a huge ocean between you. And a difference in footballing styles, although I would say, this is a great question, for me, if I might just kick off the World Football Phone-In with this, Mark. Mo Salah, a two-time BBC African Footballer of the Year. How well would he do on Tim's continent? Or at least representing footballers from Tim's continent? Would he be a match for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he was sort of a top 5, top 6, 7 finisher in the overall in the Ballon d'Or, for example. There's always a South American in there, i.e. Messi, Neymar, etc. But probably not far behind them. I mean, he's never going to top them, but not far behind them in the stakes. And at least he's got the satisfaction of knowing that his own club championship finals played on his own continent. So.
It wasn't that painful, was it?
Gleeson has taken the ring. He's jabbing already. He's kind of working behind his jab, and he's 6'9", so it's going to be hard to lay a glove on him tonight.
Always, of course it is. Why do you always bring up his height? What, are you jealous?
No, I'm quite happy being the height I am actually, but with
the lowest centre of gravity.
It was, indeed. I think it was someone like Galbraith, or was it De Gaulle, who said, the purpose in life of tall men is to terrorise smaller men, and sometimes Gleeson tries to do it, and he's certainly started early tonight.
I wonder whether it was Galbraith or De Gaulle. Makes me think you ought to remember which one of those two it would have been. It's like, was it Napoleon or was it Churchill that said, "Passe ce soir, Josephine, passe ce soir"?
Oh, that's easy. That was Churchill.
Yeah, of course it was. Okay, from what Mark says, Mo Salah would be in the frame of the top 5, if not higher in South America, amongst South America's best. What do you think, Tim?
No, I agree. I think he's a magnificent player, and it's so good to see him kick into the long grass. The idea that he was a one-season wonder. I think he's absolutely terrific. Obviously, South America is going to take the credit because that style of football was sown around the four corners of the globe more by South Americans than anyone else. But it's wonderful to watch Mo Salah keep doing what he does so well.
What does it mean for football over there, Mark, particularly in Egypt, that he wins this title again for the second time? And he says he's looking forward to winning it a third time, by the way.
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously they are in Egypt incredibly proud of his achievements. He is, undoubtedly the most successful Egyptian footballer on the international stage. They've had a lot of great footballers in their time. El Khatib, Abu Trikr more recently, who perhaps might have made a bigger splash had they gone overseas at the prime of their career. Neither of them did. And obviously played in different eras, but Salah has really become an icon for Egyptian football. I think, the BBC award is also a little bit of a forerunner of the African Footballer of the Year award that will be issued or will be handed out on the 9th of January in Dakar. It's always a good indicator of who's going to win it. So obviously Salah sits in pole position to win that award as well for a second time.
Mark, does sub-Saharan Africa feel represented by Salah?
I wouldn't. Yeah, perhaps not. I think Salah is perhaps more represented. There is more a passion behind Salah in North Africa and also in the Middle East, of course. In the Arab world, in other words. I think there is more a kinship with him. I think Sub-Saharan Africa probably looks at someone like Wanyama of Tottenham, Sadio Mane. As perhaps more of a role model. Didier Drogba was a massive player down here. Michael Essien in his heyday, Samuel Eto'o. There is, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think the North African players, the Arab-speaking North African players, are regarded as African. But I think there's much more of a kinship for them in the Middle East and in the Arab-speaking world as opposed to Sub-Saharan Africa. I think their role models are different.
I must say, the times I've been to Africa north of the Sahara, whether it was to Libya, to Morocco, to Egypt, the places I've been to, people were very proud of being African there. There was no getting away from it. Africa! Africa! As soon as they realised you were also from Africa. So I don't know how people south feel about people north of the Sahara, but certainly people north feel part of Africa rather than anywhere else. Sorry?
I think they do. I think they do accept. I think they do accept them, but I think there is. There is that linguistic difference and that perhaps that cultural difference that is quite marked between the two regions.
Oh yeah, and I don't doubt that there's a lot of racism as well. I've experienced it myself north of the Sahara, but I'm just saying that in terms of their affinity to the continent, they definitely feel that way. Cleo in Aldershot's with us. Hello, Cleo.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Tim. Good morning, Mark.
Hi, Cleo.
Morning.
Hello. I know if CAF have chosen not to hold the African Cup of Nations in Cameroon like we expected to, but aren't deciding until next month where it's going to be. And where do you think it's going to be? And for Tim, the boy from Frame Bentos did good.
Let's get on to the frame. You've made me hungry already. Let's get on to the frame Bentos in a moment. Mark, first of all, though, why have they decided to postpone the Africa Cup of Nations?
Well, they're not postponing it
until next month.
Yeah, they're not postponing it, Doc, and they've stripped Cameroon of the right to host it next June, July.
Okay.
And as Cleo says, on the 9th of January, when the EXCO meets in Dakar, the Confederation of African Football Executive Committee meets in Dakar, they will decide. Last night, midnight, was the deadline for countries to bid to come in as emergency hosts, and we all thought it would be a done deal with Morocco. It was always Cameroon were going to lose it, and Morocco were going to take over. And then all of a sudden, about 48 hours ago, the narrative changed completely with Morocco saying publicly they weren't going to host it, to everyone's massive surprise and shock. Egypt are in the running. South Africa are in the running. Ghana might well have put something in before midnight. I'm not 100% sure. I think it'll be between South Africa and Egypt. But I'm a little bit suspicious about Morocco's call, and I think that might change yet. It might be a way, in a sense, I feel it might be a way that Morocco might be sort of attempting to change the narrative a little bit on this whole thing, because they've been seen really as the aggressor. It was already 18 months ago in Rabat when they had a massive CAF. It wasn't a congress; it was a symposium, really, to look at the structures of African football in a sort of a think tank that got a whole lot of people together there to discuss the sort of future of the game and the formats of the competition, etc. It was already there 18 months ago that it was obvious that Cameroon were going to eventually be stripped of this of the hosting of the Nations Cup, not only because the feeling was that they wouldn't be ready, they wouldn't be able to properly hold a 2014 tournament. It's the first time it's going to be expanded, but there's also the political hangover of the former African Football Confederation president being from Cameroon, etc. And it was very clear then that Morocco were positioning themselves to take over. So it was a massive shock this week when they suddenly stepped out to say that they wouldn't. And I think what they're doing is perhaps just turning it around a little bit and hoping that CAF are going to find that the other countries don't want to host the tournament without any preconditions, and then might turn to Morocco and say, "Oh, please come and save us." And then Morocco almost look as if they are stepping into the breach in a helpful way rather than being the aggressor. So that's a little bit of an off-the-wall theory of mine, but I have a feeling that this political dance that we've been going through over the last 18 months is not finished just yet.
Tim, you want to talk corned beef? Go ahead.
Well, no, I want to talk Lucas Torreira, the Uruguayan from the city of Fray Bentos. And the name of the bully beef that is making you salivate at the moment comes from the city of Fray Bentos in Uruguay. It was a city before it was bully beef. And it's Lucas Torreira's home city.
He's amazing.
Well, I told you, Cleo.
He's amazing.
Yeah, I told you that that when he came, I thought he was exactly the kind of player that Arsenal needed. A little problem solver all over the field. A little Pac-Man who kind of wanders around eating up problems. And such a, little man, big heart, strong mentality. So I was expecting him to make a big impression, but I wasn't expecting him to score goals like that, towards the end of a vital game. So he's exceeding even my expectations. But a terrific piece of business, I think, from Arsenal. And as far as I'm concerned, I think he's the difference in the side this year from the side last year. So Arsenal have more than their money's worth there.
Yeah, I think we're going to be talking about him quite regularly on the World Football Phone-In. Dirk says, I'm a long listener and lurker of the show. I like that. Raheem Sterling's comments about how the written press covers young black players differently from the way that they cover young white players and contribute to the fact that they're set upon and abused on the pitch by supporters, so-called. Anyway, he says, when I heard about that, I was thinking of Tim's comments about the Brazilian media coming from different backgrounds to the players.
Yeah, I'm so glad that one's gone home, because that's exactly one of the perspectives that I have on this Raheem Sterling incident. So take it away, Dirk.
Yeah, well, he says, come from different backgrounds to the players, leading to a snooty media that looks down on the players. Something similar is happening in England, where close to 40% of the players in the Premier League are black, yet the media, and especially the written press, doesn't reflect this diversity of the modern game. How does the type of people who work in the media affect how the sport is covered in your regions?
That's so... I started raising this point in Brazil because in Brazil, very often the players are treated as ridiculous, as something to be laughed at. This bothers me, And as journalists, I think we have every right and duty to criticise, as long as we know, as long as we bear in mind the absolute insignificance of our own opinions. But treating the players as ridiculous beings, I don't like that, and it really gets me. I've come to the conclusion that in the Brazilian situation, that emerges from the fact that there's a real social chasm between the people who work in the media, who are mostly middle class, and the background of the players. And I've been away from England a long, long time, but that seems to me to be a similar dynamic. And it used to, and it cuts both ways, because it used to be the case that many in the media, and the sports media, and media generally, but let's talk about football media, they came from pretty much similar backgrounds as the players. So that there was a lot of them, they were mates, and it was a less aggressive age. And the players in those days, they got away with lots of stuff that they did off the field that was never reported. And part of that was the personal friendships that they had with the journos, and part of those personal friendships was a kind of shared cultural background, I think. And then we've seen it go two ways. On the one hand, I think the media is much, much more middle class than it was. And on the other, more of the players are not just working class, but some are underclass. And you've got the racial issue as well. So there's I think, a chasm of incomprehension, and there's not enough dialogue over that. You know, there's not enough dialogue to the great test from the Mockingbird. You know, I can only think of the film. I can only think of the title in Portuguese now.
To Kill a Mockingbird.
The Mockingbird. You know,
To Kill a Mockingbird.
That's right. Yeah, To Kill a Mockingbird. The great test there, the Atticus Finch test. You know, if you want to understand the world as someone see it, you have to wander. You have to put their shoes on and wander around and see the world from their perspective. I don't think that happens anymore. I think there's this huge cultural chasm, which is not just race; it's class as well, and it's leading to the kind of incomprehension and the kind of bad reporting and the bad feeling caused by that bad reporting that Raheem Sterling is talking about.
And what about in Africa, Mark? How distant away from the footballers are the reporters, and also how does it affect the way they report the game there?
Yeah, I think the landscape is a lot more different here. I find it incredibly young in Africa, and therefore quite inexperienced and almost sort of a little bit fan based, and also a little bit wild in a way. You know, there is a lot of irresponsible reporting, and I think it's a lack of experience, it's a lack of sort of maturity, and it's a very surprisingly a very young profession here. It seems to have a big churn, big turnover of people. Obviously, you know, journalists are not well paid, as is the case, I suppose, pretty much around the world, and they move on fairly swiftly in Africa, probably to better paying jobs. So I'm always struck when I go to major tournaments by the fact that there are sort of 10 or 20 regulars out of the 500 or odd journalists covering a major tournament like the Nations Cup, and the rest of them are just so incredibly young, you know. And in a sense, write a little bit naively and a little bit aggressively without sort of perspective and without experience. And that's really not always their own fault, but the fact that a lot of them are a little green behind the ears.
I see. Okay, and just out of interest, I wonder just to what extent that perspective affects the way that the game is reported over there, Mark.
Yeah, it's reported. I think it's reported fairly poorly, fairly mediocre. Standard is fairly mediocre, and there's not much depth and substance to coverage of football in Africa. That's always been a big complaint of administrators and coaches, and sometimes players. You don't really hear players expressing much opinion about the coverage of the game, but certainly from administrators, from coaches, I think they feel that there's not enough perspective on the game in the media because the journalists are so young and so inexperienced. I think it's just it's a factor of the marketplace, really. I think because the talented guys move on very quickly into government jobs or into commerce and into basically into better paying positions elsewhere outside of the industry. And I think there's a large turnover. It's a pity that we can't keep a lot of the guys who get exposed to some good experience pretty early on in their careers, but then have gone.
How about former footballers on both sides now, South America and Africa? What about former footballers? You'd have thought former footballers would get it right and also directly relate to the players that they'd write about. For South American-wise, do a lot of former footballers take up the game, Tim?
It's growing, yeah, and there are more and more, and I think their perspective needs to be heard, and it's a fundamental part of sports media. It's meeting, from the Brazilian sports journalists that I know, it's meeting quite a lot of resistance. It's hard enough keeping your job at the moment, without this competition that's now emerging from former players. So there is some tension there, and it's a frequent criticism that if the players have been retired for a while, they might be too keen to criticise. In other words, everything was better in my day. And if they've only recently retired and still know and still played with the people who are playing now, it's the other way around. They're reluctant to criticise. So those are the complaints that they're kind of whispered behind the scenes by the journos about the former players who are doing it. But I think the coverage gains much more than it loses from the presence and the input of those who've been out in the middle doing it.
And of course, what Tim said there, Mark, was slightly, he hinted at the rivalry between journalists and former footballers, all trying to get the same work, as it were. But in general, do you have many former footballers taking up the pen and becoming part of the media?
No, not the pen, but the microphone. I mean, as pundits, particularly on television, is the only real exposure we have to ex-players. I know of one in the entire African media circuit who's gone from being a first league player to a journalist writing, and he's left the industry after about 10 years to move on to other things. So. I mean, I think exactly what Tim is saying about the two approaches is exactly what I've experienced, particularly from the pundits. You find some are really a bit over the top in their condemnation or their criticism of the current crop, and then there's some irritatingly so, particularly on our domestic television here, who really don't tell it as it is, because they so obviously protecting their former colleagues, and yeah. the punditry in general, I think, can be improved a lot still. The punditry from the ex-pros can still be improved quite a bit. I think we're still in the infancy with that, and we probably the next generation or two we'll find the pundits are a lot better, and their punditry is also a lot better.
As you can hear, we're talking football in Africa and South America for this morning's World Football Phone-In. And, of course, players from over there, those regions, playing in our leagues as well. So feel free to comment or question our pundits, our experts this morning, who are the Springbokker Junior, Mark Gleeson, he's in Cape Town, or the legend Dino, Tim Vickery, he is in Rio representing Africa and South America respectively. Zach in Philadelphia. Hello, how are you?
Good, how's everybody doing tonight?
Fine, thanks very much. I've been told that I have to say the phone number a little bit slowly, bear with me. 08085 909 because I always speak too fast, Zach. But you clearly had no problem in picking up on how fast I say the phone number. So great to hear from you in the from the city of, is it Brotherly Love or something like that?
It is. City of Brotherly Love.
Well, show me some
you wouldn't
love.
know that by most of our sports fans.
Yeah.
Is that Philadelphia? Is it Philadelphia?
Yeah, Philly.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't show me much brotherly love when I was there. I wandered around without my shirt. It was a hot day. I wandered around without a shirt on. Yeah. And the looks you were getting, I was getting these really strange looks. And in the end, one bloke, he was a huge hulking guy. He started yelling at me. He said, "Hey, there's women and there's children there. Put your shirt on." What is the matter with you?
It's your tattoos, mate. It's your tattoos.
It just
obviously.
so happened. It just so happened that he had a shirt, a T-shirt with São Paulo written on it, the Brazilian city. So I thought, I'll go and have a chat. And I said, "What's the matter with you? Have you got some hang up about the human body?" And he didn't really have much of an answer to that. And I pointed to his T-shirt and I said, "Oh, do you like São Paulo?" And he said, "No." So I thought, all right, we're not going to be friends here. There wasn't a lot of brotherly love in that conversation. Anyway, Zach, how are you, mate?
Good. I have to.
Nice to have that off your chest, Tim.
My fiance is a huge fan of the show, and she doesn't know anything about soccer, but she loves the soothing voices.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that she's a fan of the show. And you say she doesn't know anything about soccer. Neither do I. But football's a different story.
Yeah, that's true. Tim, I wanted to ask a question about a striker that the Philadelphia Union just signed from Chile, Sergio Santos. He's a Brazilian forward. And then I had another follow-up question for everyone tonight, just about whether there are any players that have, as you get older, you have to change your game, and we have some aging players, across the league who their play styles change as they grow older. Are there any players from the pundits regions that have demonstrated a really good ability to change the way they play, change their position, as they've physically deteriorated.
That's both very good calls. I think one of those players, if I might say so, from our region, is over in your region right now, which is Wayne Rooney. You know, started moving back towards the goal the older he got, and the more he realised, you know, he couldn't quite keep up the pace of a striker anymore. That's just my penny's worth there. Listen, Zach, do you mind if we answer these questions after the news?
Yeah, of course.
I'm just trying to give your fiancée a moment or two to compose herself and everything else, because it's going to be a great answer to your great questions.
Looking forward to it.
And show us some love. Hey, the next time. Oh, I don't know, Zach. Did you hear Mark Gleeson's Pennyworth in there? He slipped it in whilst you were talking. He said that Tim had to get it off his chest. Do you get it? Boom, boom.
I get it.
I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was hilarious. Anyway, Zach, man, call up anytime. It's great to hear from you.
Thanks a lot.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
Your World Football Phony this morning is Africa and South America, and players from over there playing in our leagues. We've got the Springboker Junior, Mark Gleeson in Cape Town. We've got the Legendino, Tim Vickery in Rio. Any questions you've got for them and comments, then feel free on 08085 909 693 is our number, 08085 909 693. And this is to do with African football. Before we answer Zach's questions in Philadelphia, one of the funniest things I've seen is, I don't know if you guys follow what all these youngsters do on social media when they cut up video clips, and you know, they've got Arsenal Fan TV. I think they just call it AFTV now. I don't know if they had a dispute with Arsenal or whatever. And the guy that runs it is Crucial Robbie. I still know him as Crucial Robbie. He used to be a reggae MC, DJ. Did a famous tune called Me Proud to Be Black. Muhammad Ali made me proud to be black. I remember interviewing him back in the day and so on. But one of the guys that they've got on Fan TV is a guy called Troop. And this youngster has cut up a video of him. And it's funny, you know, it is so funny. It's like, Obama who? Obama who? Obama. I can't say the word because it's a Jamaican word that might be offensive to some people. But he goes, Obama who? Obama who? Obama Yang, Obama Yang. Honestly, it doesn't make sense now when I try and translate it on thing. But look for that in social media. It is funny. It is hilarious. Okay, back onto Zach's question. First of all, I love the way the Yanks always say Chile. Chile. You know, not chili, as we say. Chile. That's the right pronunciation, isn't it? Chile.
Well, why not? And why not take Sergio Santos up there? And it's very unusual for a Brazilian to make his way to Chile and make his name in. It's a really unusual route. So that's an interesting career story for a start. But what I like about Sergio Santos is he's an Americans will probably call him Santos, which really annoys me. Why can't they say Santos?
Well,
Santos?
They get Chile right, but they can't say Santos. You kidding?
Santos.
No.
Yeah, Santos. It's not Santos.
So is it Carlos
I saw Jennifer
Santana?
Lopez say yeah, exactly. Sergio Santos is he's got better with Audax Italiano in Santiago year by year. This is a player making good strides of development. He's physically he moves very well. He's like a trainer. What my question mark is the physical advantage that he enjoys in football in Chile. Will he enjoy the same physical advantage in MLS? Because the average biotype, the average bodily structure of the Chilean footballer, they're on the short side. They lack. We've seen this with the national team, how they lack height defensively, so maybe he's been able to stand out there more than he'll stand out in MLS. So that intrigues me to see that if you take a little bit of that physical advantage away, to see if he'll keep developing. But I would have thought a very interesting signing indeed.
Mark, first of all, though, on the second question of players who have done their time, perhaps past the peak of their careers, and have adapted their game and still maintain a very high performance despite that.
Yeah, I mean the transition is quite common these days. You know, from a defensive midfielder to a centre back. That's something that we see fairly often across all national teams in Africa. Players who've traditionally started in a more aggressive role in the midfield as they get a little bit slower. Transitioning back into the back four, traditionally from sort of 6 to 5, and I think it's pretty common around world football. The most dramatic transition of any player that I can think of from Africa, international-wise, was Lucas Radebe, who you might remember, captain Leeds United. He actually started his professional career, or semi-professional career, as a goalkeeper. Wow. And when he moved to Kaizer Chiefs, the big South African club, and broke through in the professional ranks in South Africa, he was a marauding midfielder. And when he went to England and made his name at Leeds United, he was a centre-back. So had a rather distinguished career in two different positions, and started in a third at semi-professional level. So he certainly was a talented man.
A good call as well, because, like you say, the normal trajectory is to go backwards, whereas he went forwards, so to speak, from the goal mouth. How about in South America, Tim? Anybody?
Yeah, there's a couple who I can think of. One who fits a little bit of a different narrative, because his conversion is not about physical decline. It's about how best to use his physical abilities, and that's someone who I hope people will remember from the World Cup. He played right back for Peru, Luis Advíncula, who is actually a little bit physically similar to Sergio Santos, the Brazilian who's going to Philadelphia Union. Luis Advíncula, when he started, he was a striker. Very physical, but the striker up front, reduced space, weren't getting the best out of him. So, sit down and have a look at him. All right, he's got great explosion, acceleration, and he can sustain that acceleration. So we need to find a place on the field for him where he's got more space in which to explode. So we play him at right back. He is capable of running, of doing the work up and down the field. So a man who started out as a striker ends up as a right back, because there he's got all of that space in front of him in which to explode. That I think is there are a number of cases of that kind of thing, and that I think is a really interesting conversion, and one who perhaps more fits the logic of the question. A little bit like Mark said, a central midfielder to centre back when he was at Barcelona. Who would have imagined that Javier Mascherano would have ended up playing at centre back? And usually your centre backs, the bare minimum is 6 foot. And Mascherano's tiny. You would never see him as a centre-back. And in fact, he started life in youth football as a striker. And ended up, he moved further back, and he was a central midfielder. And quite often the central midfielder can be small, because low centre of gravity in front of the centre-backs. But you'd never imagine him playing at centre-back. Barcelona did it in an emergency, and it worked so well that they stuck with it. But in order to do it, in fact, not many sides can do it, because if you're going to place someone that short in your defensive line, you've got to defend high. You can't defend deep, because he's not going to win. He's not going to win the aerial play. But what it did was it really highlighted his passing, because a side like Barcelona, who are going to build from the back, you don't want to give the ball away close to goal. So you really need precision from those who are playing the second and the third pass forward. And Mascherano's passing was very good and very crisp. So that enabled him to be a success at Barcelona at centre back.
Yeah.
Had people asked that one a couple of years earlier, Mascherano at centre back, it would have been inconceivable.
We've got a great question from Chris in Plymouth, and also a great question from Mark in Newport. Let's start with Chris in Plymouth, though. Thanks for waiting patiently, Chris. Go ahead.
That's all right, no problem. How are we doing?
Doing very well, thank you.
I've got a question for Mark, really, although it may annoy Tim, my opinion. But really, I was wondering if Mark agrees with me that an African nation will win a World Cup before the next South American one does.
No, unfortunately not.
We'll get Tim's view as well, but yeah, you go ahead, Mark.
No. Yeah, Mark's answering it for me. No.
I'd love to think so, but no, I don't think so. I think, unfortunately, We're going to wait a little bit longer on this continent. The development, I think, of the game professionally has gone a little bit slower than perhaps we would have hoped, and I think South America will probably host the tournament 2030, the great sort of centenary of the original World Cup in Uruguay. It'll probably be a joint bid with Argentina and maybe a few others, and I think there. My money would be on a Brazil or an Argentina winning the World Cup. So
apart from Brazil or Argentina, though, sorry to cut you, Mark. I'm just trying to be clear on this. Apart from Brazil or Argentina, do you think that an African team will win the World Cup before the next South American team to win it, apart from Brazil and Argentina?
Yeah. I don't. Well, who else is going to win it? Uruguay. I can't see that happening. I think they're going to be perennially at the tournament. And
Colombia could win it. At some point, Chile could win it. There are other options.
Nigeria before Colombia. I'll give you that, Dalton. Nigeria before Colombia.
Chris, you see what you've done there? That sparked up the debate. Okay.
The old can of worms open, isn't it?
Of course. Let's get the South American perspective on that then.
No, I can't. Well, firstly, 2030 is in real problems now. The Uruguay, Argentina, Paraguay bid. Because of what happened with the Libertadores final. You know, Argentina, who would stage the bulk of games in 2030, couldn't stage this one. Who came to the rescue? Spain, who have a rival bid of their own going. So 2030 is in problems. I think I broadly agree. I mean, Uruguay are contenders because they do so well at under 20 level with players who are, Mark, under 20, and this enables them to Mark knows very, very well what I'm trying to say. And the reason that the coach Tabárez has stayed on for 4 more years, is because he thinks they've got a terrific midfield. You know, with Bentancur of Juventus, Lucas Torreira, the man from Frei Bentos, and maybe Suarez and Cavani will still be firing in 2022. If not, they've got Maxi Gomez coming through very well. So Uruguay are contenders, and Colombia have lots of potential. They've done one World Cup quarter-final, nearly made it, only penalties stopped them getting to a second successive World Cup quarter-final. So, yeah, they are the possibilities. But maybe if a Nigeria or someone can get their act together, maybe Nigeria can get there before Colombia. I don't violently disagree with Mark's position.
Chris, what do you think?
Well, really, I was taking into account that probably European teams are going to win the next 4 or 5.
Yeah, that's probably true.
To be honest, I would have thought Nigeria or South Africa, even if they got their act together, would have a decent chance before one of the other South American nations. I mean, Uruguay are obviously probably the wild card, but Uruguay have won it before, of course, haven't they?
And thank you for the call. Thanks very much for putting that point across. Just a quick one to you, Mark. When Chris talks there about echoing your words about getting their act together, I know it's not just about quality of footballers, because otherwise Belgium would probably have won the World Cup this year. But why is it that when some African teams like Nigeria have so many, and like the French African teams as well, have so many great players to choose from in their squad, that the countries nevertheless have to rely on getting their act together? Surely 90% of the act being together is that the players are there playing in European teams and able to sort of match up against the best in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be misunderstood. I think when I say sort of having developed professionally, it's more to do with the professional game on the continent itself. And I think if you look at the squads, they are not as fulsome as you would want to believe, and therefore, you take a Nigeria, for example. You've probably, to be fair, you've probably got 9 to 10 really good footballers, top class, top league players based at European clubs in the starting 11. The other 2 are coming from lower leagues in Europe, maybe 3 or 4 at a push if there's some injuries. But when you go to a World Cup, the depth off the bench for all the African sides is actually quite poor, and there is still a fairly large contingent, or let's say a quarter on average, comes from the domestic leagues, and the gap between those players and the rest is particularly poor. Or they come from the 3rd and 4th division in France, in the case of many of the French-speaking countries who never really call up anyone from the domestic leagues, and they are also particularly poor. So the depth in all of the African national sides and all of these major tournaments in the past has not been what it could be because of the development of the game domestically, in my opinion. And I think if you analyse the squads from Africa that have gone to World Cups, the last 5 or 6 World Cups, they are top heavy. There's a big gap between the best player in the squad and the worst player, a bigger gap than with the Europeans and with the South Americans. And I think that really does impact on your ability to sustain yourself through a month of World Cup football.
Mark in Newport, fortune's always hiding. Hello, Mark.
Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, fine. Season's greetings to you all.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, good.
The great Gilberto. How you doing?
Yes. No, thanks, mate. The young one's not well this evening. That's part of the reason why I'm up and about, making a cup of tea for everybody. Keeping an eye on the little one. He's coming up with 6th birthday now, would you believe?
Oh, gosh, I can't believe that. He was once our youngest Brazilian shirt name holder. I think he still is, but by a whisker now, if he's getting to that age. Goodness gracious.
Yeah, it won't be long he'll be calling in himself. Yeah, he's football mad, it's safe to say.
Is he forever blowing bubbles, though?
He's not. Well, he started off, but he's not a West Ham fan, but it's a very good link to my question.
Yeah.
My question is about Felipe Anderson. We've spoken about him in the past, moved from Santos over to Lazio, did really well there. 3 good seasons at Lazio. Settled right into the Premier League, scoring goals, certainly kind of dragging West Ham forward as it stands. And the question is, what are his current chances of full international prospects, I suppose?
Well, they're watching him. He's certainly on their radar screen. He's got some bad history with the Brazilian national team to overcome. He played for them at under-20 level in a team that failed even to qualify for the World Under-20 Cup that year. So he didn't do anything there. And if you remember the Olympic campaign a couple of years ago, he started in the team, and the first couple of games were just dreadful 0-0 draws. I mean, the first one, if I remember, was so terrible. They couldn't even score a goal against Gleeson's rabble from South Africa. And Felipe Anderson was in the side for those 2 games, and it just didn't work at all. And they only started picking up towards winning the Olympic gold medal when they got rid of him. And they brought in Luan of Grêmio, and suddenly there was football. So he's got some bad history in a Brazil shirt, which leaves a question mark there. However, I think that there could be a place for him. And the way that they're kind of lining their team up, and they call it a 4-1-4-1, but I think you can clearly see a midfield trio there. And that midfield trio is Casemiro to hold, Arthur of Barcelona to link, and Felipe Coutinho to be the cutting edge there of that 3. Well, that's a risk, I think, with Felipe Coutinho. It didn't quite come off in the World Cup playing him there as a midfielder. Barcelona started him there this season, and they seem to have abandoned that. They seem to think that he's better in the attacking 3 than in the midfield 3. But if so. And it hasn't really worked for Brazil, and they're convinced that it will work. But I think they need to look at alternatives. And one alternative for an attack, the most attacking member of that midfield trio, it could be Felipe Anderson, because he does put in a shift as well. He's working hard. He does blow hot and cold, and sometimes you go through games when you don't see too much of him. but he is running off the ball. He's getting back behind the ball. So if he keeps doing his doing for West Ham, then I think he's got a chance, although it's not going to be an easy road into the team because the competition is so fierce.
Yeah, as Budgie says, it's not an easy road. Some see the glamour and the glitter, and they think it's a bed of roses. Mark, thanks very much. 08085 90969.
And so the kid gets better.
Yeah, indeed, Bebeto. Young Bebeto there, who, as a little baby, got his first Brazilian shirt name, eh? Couldn't say better than that, and he's contributed to the show many a night, not least in keeping his dad awake. Oh, this is a long one from Adam in Peterborough. Or he's a Peterborough fan in any case. He says, we all saw back in July in Moscow how President Macron congratulated each of the passing French players by holding them by the face and yelling at them in a rather testosterone-fueled congratulatory manner as if he himself was somehow successful to their success. According to the German press, the upcoming president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, went one better last week when instead of presenting the victorious Palmeiras side with a trophy for winning a regional championship, he instead triumphantly raised the trophy aloft in the air and milked the support of the crowd as if he himself was the victorious captain.
Well, he's a Palmeiras fan. So,
yeah. But in the process, he, by all accounts, rather irritated several members of the winning team who gave him withering looks and ignored him. Can the Legendino confirm that this really happened, and do any of the guests have any experience of equally bizarre behaviour from politicians at football matches? Can't wait to hear the Africa ones. But first, South America.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's Scolari is the coach of Palmeiras, the former Brazil coach, former Chelsea coach, and Scolari was very, very happy to see Bolsonaro there celebrating with them. It was a Brazilian championship that they won, and a lot of the players have come out as. All in general, the vast majority are supporting so far anyway is far right agenda. I didn't see too many askance looks. The weirdest story that I have from the big medal boys is invading the scene is the fellow who he was the head of Brazil's FA, Marin. He's now waiting sentence in the United States after being caught up in the FIFAgate scandal. He robbed a medal. The medals that are given out to the players, he
nicked one.
He nicked one for himself.
No.
Yeah.
So
I wonder if Africa can outdo that.
That's a challenge.
Yeah.
But in Africa, a lot of politicians would claim that, they're the most important part in a team, wouldn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And the problem in Africa, obviously, over the years has been the fact that the state coffers are, often carry the national sides of many. The potential for football associations in Africa to make money is a lot poorer or a lot less than elsewhere in the continent because obviously there's not a lot of television competition, which drives up the sales of rights, and that's how you can make money. Often the stadiums are not owned by the club or the football association; they're owned by municipal or state authorities. They, sometimes keep a large portion of the gate. The bottom line is there's not much revenue going for your average football association in Africa, and you need to turn to the government to get them to help you finance your trips to play in qualifiers, etc. And that gives the sports minister, in particular, the most exalted position in football in most of these countries. And we've had a merry tradition over decades of sports ministers choosing national team coaches, choosing teams. Cameroon in 1990 was helping assist the side. That's the reality of African football. Perhaps less and less these days, as FIFA really do insist on autonomy. But that only really comes into play when the sports minister looks to change the federation leadership and install some of his mates or some of his relatives, which is often been the case in African football. We've had the big man syndrome, unfortunately, for a very long time, and I think it will continue until such time as there's financial independence for football associations.
And not just football. I know my cousin's stepbrother was sports minister for one of the states in Nigeria, had loads of tickets for 2012. He didn't even give us a single one, Didn't give us a single ticket. Shocking. But then again, it would have been nepotistic if he had done, if you know what I mean. So my hands are clean, clearly.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
Yeah, World Football Phone-in this morning is Africa and South America and players from over there playing in our leagues. So we've got the Springbokker Junior representing Africa on the one side. And we've got the Legendino representing South America and players from over there playing in our leagues on the other side as well. It's an interesting question, actually, here. A couple of questions for both of you, actually, one each. Will, first of all, Joseph Martinez be looking at a move to Europe after his great season for Atalanta, asked Thomas. He also asked a sub-question to you, Mark. Are we entering a golden era of North African football with all the talent emerging from the region? Can we take that first? Is there a golden era that we seem to have overlooked or not?
No, I don't think so at all. I think I can only refer you to the comments of the Tunisian coach Nabil Maloul after the World Cup, where admittedly they had a tough group with England and Belgium, but he said very clearly players from the Arabic-speaking world, from the Middle East and from North Africa, were really a long way off being competitive with world-class footballers, and that the World Cup had shown that. Both a dismal performance from both Egypt and from Tunisia. And while we've had Mohamed Salah come through, and there were a couple of Algerian players, Brahimi, for example, at Porto, who do very well individually, I would certainly say that there's no golden age at the moment, in particularly in North African football. They do dominate club-wise the club sphere in Africa, as they always have done, a little bit stronger than elsewhere on the continent. But in terms of being internationally competitive, I think North Africa is still a long way off.
And what about this Atalanta player, Tim, Joseph Martinez? What can you tell us about him?
Yeah, Venezuelan striker. Will he go back to Europe? Because he has been there already. He played in Switzerland. He played in Italy. Played for Torino. I'm intrigued by this one because I would imagine.
But sorry to interrupt you. Isn't this question about the coach? Isn't it?
No. Joseph Martinez. No, the coach is going to Mexico. This is Joseph Martinez, the Venezuelan striker. Yeah. Next time you want to needlessly interrupt, please go ahead.
Thank you, sir.
My pleasure. With Joseph Martinez, he psychologically.
Indeed, I was going to say that.
He likes to feel important. He's one of those players, he doesn't have to throw some strops when he gets substituted. Blind. You don't want to be close to him when he gets substituted. So the fact that he is king of the hill there in the MLS, on a personal level, I can imagine him wanting to stay. Now, obviously, footballers are become commodities, and they're surrounded by agents who want to make money off him. So I can imagine that there may well be commercial pressures to push him back to Europe. But from a kind of psychological point of view, it wouldn't surprise me at all if he stayed. And now, as an olive branch of peace, Gleeson, since we're talking about you were talking about North African club football, the World Club Cup is upon us. Africa, providing that Esperance, the African champions, get through Al Ain in a few hours' time, they will take on the South American champions, River Plate. So this lot, Esperance, are they a bunch of no-hopers?
No, not no-hopers, but an adequate side, but certainly not strong enough to do what Raja Casablanca did a few years ago and win finally against the South American side. I think I'm going to have to give this one. I'm going to give you the olive branch back, Tim, and hand it to you nicely, even though I've got a Sao Paulo T-shirt on.
Do they have? Are they one of those North African sides who are cautious with attacking pace? Because if so, I wonder. River Plate don't have a great deal of defensive pace, and you saw that in the Libertadores final. They went 1-0 down to a counter-attack goal and could have gone 2-0 down. And when the North African sides, and Raja Casablanca, for example, they beat the South American champions in the semi-final. It was the Brazilians, Atlético Mineiro, and they did them with pace. And a lot of in club football, a lot of the South American defenders are slow. So if Esperance can cover up and launch quick counters, I wonder if they have a chance. But is that the characteristic of their side?
That's how they won the Champions League. In fact, they were playing at home and countering against Al Ahly of Egypt, and they certainly were very pacey on that. But I wonder whether whether River are going to attack them with the kind of abandon that Utley did and allow those sort of gaps at the back. I don't see. I find it difficult to believe that a side of the reputation of River Plate would be that naive. I think it's going to be a little bit cagey, and in the sense, technically, Esperance perhaps don't have, physically and strength-wise and technically probably don't have what it takes to beat River Plate head-to-head. And but they have proven on the counter they can certainly do well. They did. I mean, that's how they won the Champions League.
Let's pass that olive branch
ever
around,
since this competition started, 2005, the semi-final has always been a nightmare for the South Americans. Now, Mazembe of the Democratic Republic of Congo beat Internacional, and I think Friday was the anniversary. So the supporters of Internacional's city rival there in Porto Alegre, the supporters of Grêmio, they celebrate every year on December the 14th. They celebrate Mazembe Day. The day when their great rivals lost to a team, to the African champions. But so there have been a couple of times when the South American side has lost. But even when they've won, they have never won in comfort. It's always been, and part of that is psychological, because they're desperate to have a crack at the European champions. In terms of this year, I think that psychological pressure is a little bit less, because River Plate have climbed their highest mountain. They've beaten Boca Juniors in the Libertadores final. So the pressure is a little bit off. But although it almost is as if they're playing double or quits, because they haven't been home. Since winning the Libertadores, they haven't been home. So they will go home either as club world champions, in which case there is no mountain left to climb, or as losers in the Club World Cup, in which case that knocks a little bit of the shine off winning the Libertadores. So it's kind of double or quits. From a South American point of view, they're looking at the European champions and thinking we got a chance against Real Madrid, because Real Madrid are in a real transitionary phase. It's not the Real Madrid that won the title. Maybe this is our year, but they've got to get through that semi-final first, and it's never been easy. And if Esperance can cover up and counter-attack, we might have a game.
Yeah, well, let's wait to see if they can get through today first before we get on to that. Recently African sides have struggled to beat the Asians and even the New Zealanders on their way to the semi-finals.
Michael in Highbury, hello.
Hello, Dawson.
Guna Samaritan, as we call you.
Guna Samaritan, that's right, yeah. I'm probably very premature, but I can't wait to the January transfer window. Unai Emery, the Arsenal manager, in a press conference stated that he might have to buy another central defender because of the long-term injury to Holding, which is extremely unfortunate, and also recurring injuries to our present central defenders.
Wouldn't you love to buy him from Spurs again? Wouldn't you love to buy one from Spurs again? Didn't you get Sol Campbell? Well, he was a freebie. He was a freebie.
We got him for free.
Yeah. So I know.
No, don't wind Tim up. It's not my reason for ringing.
I'm trying.
I'd like to ask Tim or Mark, even though it's very early, have they heard any rumours in their respective country areas in regards of a potential central defender for Arsenal? And or is there any recommendations for an Arsenal central defender of whom we can afford? Because the club have announced that they want to be sustainable and not overspend.
Who wants to go first?
I can answer in the negative. There's not expected to be much activity out of Africa into England, and particularly into the Premier League in this January transfer window. Most of that stuff is done in June, July, and certainly rumour-wise, there's been absolutely nothing from this continent.
Tim?
If I know what I would do if I were Dick Emery, he is awful. I would go back to Paris Saint-Germain, and where he was first, where he was last season, and I would pick up Marquinhos. The young Brazilian, who I think is a terrific defender, and I think he's the future as well. I think he's quick. I think he's a wonderful defender. You'd have to pay money for him, but quality isn't cheap, and quality pays for itself. Look at what Jurgen Klopp said about the goalkeeper, Alisson, that they brought in. If he knew he was this good, he would have been happy to pay double. And the save that Alisson makes at the end, that's more than paid for his transfer fee, because it's got him through to the knockout phases of the Champions League. And I think Marquinhos has the potential to be that influential. I think he's a terrific defender. Emery knows him very well, so that for me would be the obvious move.
And Michael, out of interest, is your manager doing the Congo? Sorry, what did you say?
What sort of money are we talking about in regards to transfer?
I've got no idea. I'm not very good with transfer fees. I can only just imagine this pile of money and thinking that's much more money than I'll ever see in my lifetime.
Arsenal can afford it, though. Come on now. You've built your stadium, you built all your houses around your stadium. It's time to splash out a little bit of money.
Yeah, I mean, we are actually playing the homeless on Wednesday. I mean, I was really.
I like that. I enjoyed that. It's true, though. It's true. You lot are homeless. You're homeless.
Step in.
No, not at all. After your Dick Emery bit.
I was just to say, I gloated on social media in the summer how when Arsenal built their stadium, it was built within time and it was built within budget.
Or, as Kevin Keegan said, you can read this in the GAFTA Awards, look at Arsenal. They sold, who was it? Nicolas Anelka, and they built a stadium on him.
Nicolas Anelka, we bought him for £400,000, sold him for $23 million. He paid for the new training complex.
But then you built the stadium on him. Which was uncalled for. You know that Tim was going on about.
He's gone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I've really seen him for a while.
Apparently,
he was rumoured to be joining a Brazilian club a few years ago. He didn't turn up. Now I know why.
You know why? When Tim was going on about Dick Emery, I tried to throw in, after he did his "Oh, you are awful, but I like you," I tried to throw in the conga, but none of you remember the conga, do you? Remember that was Dick Emery's one hit in the pop charts. Come on and do the conga, you do my songa.
I don't remember it.
You don't remember
there
it?
There is some rubbish that I don't remember. No, I'm so happy that I don't remember it.
That was one of those days. Anyway, you should sing that to your manager, Michael. You might appreciate it.
It's brought up a particular subject. I've got a confession to make.
Oh, okay. I like confessions. I'm listening.
I've never said it to you before because I didn't know whether you believe me or not. But I'm sure you think I'm genuine enough. I don't actually do it to Unai. I've met him once and had my photo taken with him, but he was in a rush to get home. But my claim to fame is that I talked on a fairly regular basis to Arsene Wenger for all his 22 years.
Wow, okay.
It started at Highbury. At Highbury, the first home game when we beat Coventry 3-1, he had to come out the main entrance. He used to come out the main entrance to walk to the JVC Centre to pick up his car. And he was signing some youngsters' programmes, and I stood behind him. And the previous weeks, he said to the media he would travel to the ground by tube to see what it was like for ordinary fans to go to the ground.
Brilliant.
I just simply said to him, how was your journey on the tube today, Arsene? And he laughed. I mean, in the Highbury days, if he didn't want to stop, he would just drive past and wave. And I thought when we moved to the Emirates, it would stop. But I reckon, apart from him 2 or 3 games a season leaving by the Halsey Road exit, he would stop for me in Queensland Road. And, I'd reckon 95% of the time in the Emirates years.
That's not bad. Did he speak to you by name? I mean, were you on first name terms with him?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. when I got unemployed, when I was made redundant in 2012, the summer of 2013, as someone suggested to me, as the DWP, as people advise, you don't just actually sort of search for jobs. You ask in your community people that could help you find a job. And in the summer of 2013, I actually asked him, is it possible he could inquire about a job for me at the Arsenal? And he told me he'd actually spoken to Ivan Gazidis about me.
Oh, wow, okay.
But somebody at the ground who would deal with it never actually contacted me.
Yeah, it's always way. Well done you, mate. And I like the confessional. That was a good one. I was a bit nervous when you said confessional. I was like, we're not that kind of a programme. You know,
well, how well Arsene Wenger comes out of that story as well.
Does, actually.
What a gentleman.
Yeah.
What a gentleman of the game.
No,
the thing is, you could ask him, you could talk to him about anything, but I mean, if you ever, there's a rare occasion he would say, like he would tell the press that a particular player he wasn't interested in. But I mean, generally, if you speak to him about music or anything at all, you know, he's an incredibly intelligent man and deeply respectful. The only thing is disappointment. I gave him a goodbye. I gave him a goodbye card with all my home details, telephone numbers, etc. And he initially did take my mobile number when looking for a job for me at the Arsenal. And he just handed it into the club, and all I got was an official club card thanking me for my support and my support of Arsene Wenger. So that's, you know, if he ever writes a book, hopefully he might mention me.
Yeah, I won't buy it unless he does. Don't worry, mate. Hey, listen, Michael, thanks very much for that. And my own moment of respect for Arsene Wenger was when, you know, my missus did it to wind me up in any case, when she bumped into him at the supermarket up our way and she took a selfie with him. I thought, oh, that's nice of him. You know, I mean, the guy could have said, look, not today. He took a real, and this was when he was under pressure a lot, but he took a very friendly, smiley selfie with my missus, and she immediately sent it to me because she's a gooner. And I thought, okay, fair dues to him. Fair dues to the bloke. David in Wolverhampton says, who do you think will win the Club World Cup, and what does each pundit think about the team's chances from their respective continents? Also, what do you think about the long-term future of the tournament, particularly when it will need to be rearranged in 2022 to avoid clashing with the World Cup? Who's going to win the Club World Cup, Mark?
I think it's a little bit open this year because, as Tim has already alluded to, Real Madrid are rubbish. River Plate aren't all that great, so it could be quite interesting. I think, you know, hopefully it might be an opportunity for Africa to burst through, but we don't have the strongest side on hand at that particular tournament. But yes, it's interesting. It's also interesting to see what's going to happen to it, because obviously part of the new proposals that the FIFA president is putting forward is a much expanded Club World Cup. I think eventually it's got to come, and I think eventually it will get some wheels. But there's obviously a lot of opposition from traditional quarters, not least the money-spinning UEFA Champions League. So, you know, it's going to be a perennial talking point, I think, for some while to come.
Do all the African countries take it seriously, or are there some that take it more seriously than others?
Yeah, I think more so. I think the passion for this tournament really is 90% driven from South America, you know, and obviously that comes from the old intercontinental challenge that they used to have with the Europeans. I mean, this really is just expansion of that tournament to include the others and make it a little bit more international. But it remains essentially Europe versus South America, with, you know, the occasional Mazembe upset. But I think in Africa, when Mazembe did well and got to the final and lost to the Italians, there was quite a bit of coverage of that and quite a bit of pride. Raja Casablanca the one year did well as well, but it's not as passionately followed on the continent as it is in South America. I think particularly because Africans don't really fancy that they have any chance to win it.
Who's going to win the Club World Cup, Tim?
Well, the one thing that you would say for Real Madrid is that for historical reasons, they take this seriously. They take it, I think, more seriously than any other European club. However, they are in transition. And I think Wednesday's semi-final could be interesting. They will face the winners of Kashima Antlers of Japan and Chivas Guadalajara of Mexico. And not just River Plate or Esperance in the final, but in the semi-final, the Japanese team and the Mexican team might be thinking, well, hang on a minute, we've got a chance here. If you pin me to the wall and ask me who do I think is going to win it, I probably think Real Madrid. But I do think this year is more interesting than previous years, exactly because Real Madrid are in such a strange period of transition. And clearly, Mark's 100% correct about the future of the competition. It hasn't really worked. It hasn't got enough global attention. And sooner or later, Infantino will succeed, I think, in getting through a bigger version involving more European clubs, which will gain more global attention.
Is that necessarily a good thing?
I think so. I think there would be some wheels for it, perhaps elsewhere outside of Europe, but it will break a little bit the what is really a growing monopoly or a growing massive influence on the game from the top European clubs, who really through the vehicle of the Champions League spin an incredible amount of money and have an incredible amount of power, perhaps undemocratically so.
Tim?
Yeah, my only fear is this constant quest to invent new championships and make the season longer and longer and longer. So I worry about the physical burden which is being placed on the top players. But apart from that, I mean, clearly as it is, it's not satisfactory. Some better version is needed. Because at the moment, I remember that there was a pioneering version at the start of 2000 here in Rio that Man United controversially turned up to. And that was a different format. That was 2 groups of 4 with the winners meeting in the final. And Sepp Blatter gave a press conference before the final, and he said, "No, it's all right, but it hasn't really worked. And what we need, if this is going to work, we need more solidarity for the Europeans. The Europeans will have to give this more time." And what in fact happened when they relaunched it again in 2005 is the Europeans give it less time, and the tournament is made for the Europeans to fly in, play the semi-final on Sunday, the semi-final on Wednesday, the final on Sunday and on Saturday, and that's it. So they're there for much less than a week. And that doesn't make for a great competition. It's almost as if the European team is doing everyone a favour just by turning up. So having a proper tournament when you get all the sides there through a group phase has clear advantages. You want the champions of all the continents to be together. That's such a sound idea. But there's the worry of yet another championship being invented, yet more demands being placed on the players who already probably play too much football.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear a single word that you said there. I was suddenly distracted by the fact that I've just realised that Naomi Campbell has just retweeted me.
No way.
Well,
Yes way.
What was your tweet?
I know. Well, I didn't tweet. I wrote an article about her that I interviewed her just a couple of months back, and I told everybody about it. Didn't I send you a picture of me and Naomi together, Tim? I'm sure I did, to make you jealous.
You didn't send me the picture.
I didn't send you the picture. I mean, Naomi together.
No, you made a big thing of name dropping.
Yeah,
and just for a minute there, I thought she was retweeting
she was listening to the World Football
message
Phone
about the World Football Phone.
I knew you'd
Instead,
think
it's an interview about her.
I don't know if she's not listening to the World Football Phoning. All I'm saying is that she's just tweeted the article that I wrote about her. Yeah, she just retweeted it. Oh, well done, Naomi. And there were 2 Naomi Campbells that have retweeted it. One of them's only got 10 followers. The other one's got 644,000. I think it's safe to assume that I know which is which. I know which side my bread is buttered on that one. No, I was honestly, I'm like, wow, because it comes through your own feed that, Naomi Campbell's retweeted you. It distracted me. Anyway, back to the World Football Phone-In. Anand
Did she retweet you right now? I mean, is she returning from a club at 5:30 in the morning, or is she getting up for exercise?
Listen, it's not 5:30 all over the world.
It's the World Football Phone-In. What do you think?
It's not 5:30 in the morning all over the world. In fact, in New York, it's probably only about 10 o'clock in the evening, 10:30 or thereabouts. So, and
she's not London-based.
I'm not allowed. No, she's not London-based. Actually, when I saw her, she said, "No, it's not." She didn't regard London as her home anymore. She's a global citizen now. Anyway, if we can move on to the football, because I fear that you're going to make comments or ask questions that are going to ruin my relationship, as delicate as it is with Naomi. So let's move on swiftly. Yeah, you know what I'm like. Anand, 35 minutes ago, Anand tweeted, and I missed it. Sorry, Anand. Anand in New Delhi. It's a good one, you know. You know, we're talking earlier on, Mark, about getting their act together, the African teams. Now, Anand, as quick as as a whistle, has quickly said the question is too nebulous. I bet neither of you know what that refers to.
No, exactly. That's
something to do with
Theresa
Brexit.
May.
Yeah, well done,
Yeah.
you lot, well done. I'm just
really
checking.
it's too
Just checking. Well done. Full marks to Mark, and then Vickery at the back of the class gets a 3 out of 10 because he hasn't really been
Well, I
following.
don't want to
it.
interrupt Mark. You know, after all, he's never done it to me.
The lowest form of humour, that one, mate. The lowest form, if I might say so.
I can find lower ones. Don't you worry.
08085 909 693. If you'd like to join in the World Football Phone, we're talking football in Africa and South America. Straight after the news, I'm going to tell you an incredible story about this World Football Phone-In and the impact it has, okay?
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
So we're talking football in Africa and South America and players from over there playing in our leagues. We've got the Springbokker Junior, Mark Gleeson, with us in Cape Town, and we've got the Legendino Tim Vickery with us in Rio. They're answering your questions on African football and South American football, respectively, and, of course, on players from over those regions playing in our leagues as well. I said I'd tell you this remarkable story. Just earlier on Friday, I was pumping the air into my rear tyres, the manual way, yes, on my road, and my neighbour across the road came out of her garden. I don't see her much anymore. She's 23. She goes to, college and whatnot, so you don't see much of your neighbours. But, somebody that I've known since she was about 5 or 6 years old, because I've lived there for so long. And she said to me, her aunt, who recently lost her husband, has been comforted by this phone-in so much. It's been a difficult time for her. It's been comforted. It's really, really emotional, actually, when I heard it, because you do this program over and over and over again, and you don't get a sense of how it impacts on people's lives, but I can assure you it does. And I'm very grateful to both of you and all the other contributors of this phone-in, and the listeners as well, who contribute a vital part to the phone-in, our callers and our texters and emailers, because you never know. When you text and you email and you call, there's somebody out there who is getting a real sort of pleasure, comfort, support, and, and feeling part of the family, as it were. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to say. Let's speak to... but before I go to the next caller, if I said to you, either of you, and full marks for the person who gets this right, if I said to you, Norske Rikskringskasting, what am I talking about?
Naomi Campbell.
Yeah, close. Close. Well, close. It's NRK. Close, not a million miles away.
We don't know what it means.
Yeah.
We don't know what it says, but we know.
Is it not?
But we know what you're thinking about.
Norske Rikskringskasting. Faisal in Norway. Do you want to tell them? Hello.
Hello. Hi. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Good morning.
What is Norske Rikskringskasting?
It's the Norwegian version of BBC.
That's right. NRK. Norska Riksringskastning. It's funny, for a Swedish speaker, it's very funny to hear Norska Riksringskastning. I can't stop saying it now that I've said it. But it probably isn't as funny to you lot.
Jag är också från Sverige.
Det är klart att jag är från Sverige. Hör du inte? Du hör inte att jag är svensk?
Jo, jag hör det.
Okej. Jag förstår det nu. Välkommen, mycket välkommen. And you want to talk football. Mrs. Thatcher, our boys gave your boys a hell of a beating.
Lord Anthony Eden.
Yes.
It's my favourite.
We love you, Norway. In fact, we love you so much, we're trying to get out of Europe with a Norway Plus. This is what they call it.
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck. It's the right answer. Anyway, great to have you on, Faisal. You go ahead, take your time.
Yeah, I was just wondering about if the kind of demand from the big European leagues, if that has any impact on youth development in South America or Africa.
That's a good question. That's a really good... Did you both get that? How the European market impacts on youth development in Africa and South America?
Hugely. Very, very big. I mean, I've been here a long time now, and if I go back 20 years, if I spoke then to very young, 10, 11, 12-year-old with dreams of football, promising players, I would ask them what the dream was, and then it was to play for one of the local clubs here in South America. Fast forward 7 or 8 years, and the dream is Real Madrid, Barcelona. 10-year-old kids, some of them, they couldn't find Spain on a map, but they've grown up, globalized with, and that's the aim. So they want to get there as soon as possible. And over the last few years, a kind of consensus has built up from the players want to go, and also the clubs, the European clubs, have come to the conclusion that by and large it's best to get them over as soon as possible. Now, in human terms, that's a risky strategy, because you can't bring them over until they're 18. So they wait until they're 18 and then bring them over. And in human terms, that has far more risks than bringing them over when they're 22. Because at 18, they are still very, very young indeed, and it could go wrong. But the consensus is, and I think that the players now accept this as well, that in footballing terms, in technical terms, you want to get over as quickly as possible. Because while you're staying in South American football, it's now so far behind. And the easy way to see this is just to look at a game and see where the defensive lines are. And usually in South America, the defensive lines are very, very deep, which means the pitch is very big, which makes it hard actually to play a passing game, because the lines of the side, the defence, midfield and the attack and so on, they're so far apart. And obviously the further apart the lines of the team are, the harder it is to play a pass with any precision. So what you get nowadays in South American football is lots of long balls, lots of big kicks. It also helps explain why one of the types of player that South America is producing so much are the strikers in wide spaces, much more than the centre forwards, the strikers in wide spaces. Because on the big pitch in South America, they've got plenty of room to pick up the ball and run at the defence. They've got acceleration space there. And so I think both the European club and the player thinks, get them over to Europe as quick as possible, to a more modern, compact, condensed football, because the longer they stay in South America, the more vices they'll pick up, and the harder it will be to adapt on the field when they do end up making the move. So it's made a huge difference, and that whole process has happened in the 24 years that I've been here.
I imagine it's a similar thing in Africa as well, Mark?
Yes, perhaps more pronounced in the sense that have actually come onto the continent and built infrastructure to develop talent for their own markets. So, i.e., we have academies, etc., clubs like PSG, Monaco, Man United at one stage, all investing Ajax Amsterdam, all investing quite heavily in infrastructure, in academies, in educational institutions with a football bent to develop talent for the market. Seeing Africa obviously as a ready supply source of young and exciting talent, and without the necessary infrastructure, actually coming onto the continent and building the infrastructure needed to try and develop these players. So, it's perhaps even more pronounced on the African continent. When Tim talks about young Brazilians changing their ambition over the last 20 years, it's certainly been the ambition of young Africans for much longer than that to go and play in European football.
And what about the ambition in Africa? Has it ever, because obviously club football in South America is much, much more established and deeply rooted than club football in Africa. So has there ever really been the burning ambition to represent the local side, or has that never been as strong in African football?
No, I think that it had. Since the 80s already, to a better life through football into Europe has been very clear to the African footballer, and so I think the ambitions were very quickly changed. So it's certainly, you still find, in this country, for example, you still find kids who still want to play for Kaizer Chiefs. In Egypt, you'll find kids who want to play for Al Ahly and Zamalek. That's their main focus. But I think the vast majority of young African footballers with any serious talent and who've reached any decent level know and seek to go to Europe.
Faisal, in Norway as well, hasn't there been an importation of African footballers?
Yeah, there have been some. Yeah. Because it's quite. Most clubs in Sweden and Norway don't have that much money, so it's a bit cheaper to get African players in. We've also had a lot of Brazilians who have come over here.
And I know at least one or two of the Africans have represented the Norwegian national side as well, haven't they?
Yeah, you have a couple of them, but they are mostly born here to African parents.
How would you rate the experience of watching football, club football in Norway?
Well, it's a bit, the level isn't very high because the problem here is the same as in South America, that when players get 18, 19, 20, they are gone.
And where do they go? Where do they generally go?
They go generally to Europe, to... A lot of players are in Germany, Holland. If you go back 20 years, there were a lot of Scandinavian players in the UK.
Yeah,
but,
Jan Arne Riise. I remember Jan Arne Riise.
Yeah, you had Henning Berg, you had Jan Arne Riise, you had
Super Sub.
Solskjaer.
Yeah, Solskjaer.
Yeah. Solskjaer. But nowadays they go mostly to Holland because the money is much better there.
The money's better in Holland than in England. Are you having a laugh?
No, not in. From compared to Sweden and Norway.
Oh, I get you.
Because most of the clubs here are don't have that much money. And we have this 51% rule over here, where no one can buy a club more than 49%.
Oh, right.
So no one is really prepared to put in a lot of money in the clubs like you have in UK.
Because they can't control the club, essentially.
Yeah, because it's run by the members.
That's interesting. So, that's kind of like partly the way things are run in Germany.
Indeed. Yeah. I think it's the same model.
Listen,
Spain as well.
Yep. Listen, the line's breaking up, Faisal, but I'd like to hear from you again any time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes.
Keep us updated. And if there are any decent footballers from over there that you think we should keep an eye on as well, do let us know.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
Tack ska du ha. Hej då.
Hej då.
Yeah, absolutely. Faisal there in Norway. It's fascinating, though, to hear just how different things are in a country that shouldn't be that far away from us. And, you know, we said jokingly when, you know, Norway beat England, big story, but a relatively, or a relative minnow in terms of football, they're not bad, are they, Norwegians? They're not bad as a...
They've come along.
Actually, I've just remembered, Mark, it was you that I wanted to lose, not Faisal. It's your line that's breaking up. Yes, I should have kept Faisal on, representing Africa. So, say what you were trying to say again one more time.
Norway were real rubbish in the 60s, 70s, and then made that big breakthrough at USA '94. Obviously, going to the World Cup, and now certainly are a sort of a medium-level European football playing nation. But in the 70s and 80s, playing Norway, getting Norway in your group in a qualifying competition was in those days 4 points guaranteed. So they have come a long way.
Simon in London, good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Sorry for keeping you waiting, but, you know, I had to allow Mark to take it all over again because his line broke up, you know, so he kept you waiting for about 25 minutes.
No, not a
just
problem.
to re-answer
Actually, on the question of Norwegian players, actually, as a Scotsman myself, there's a very good player at Celtic called Christian Aja, who's a centre-half come centre midfielder, who, in my opinion, probably is set for the Premiership. But I just wanted to go back and pay homage to Tim Vickery, of course, who I read from the age of 15 for a long time, and his point about players in South America coming from the wings is very apt. Actually, I think if you look at Gabriel Jesus and Firmino in the Premiership, if you think about it, yes, that's very much the incoming style for the South American player in the Premiership. But I guess I long for a Pablo Aimar or a Juan Riquelme, but I imagine it's not really coming through in the South American system these days.
There aren't many, but you still see one or two. Still part of the DNA there. I don't know if you saw the Libertadores final on Sunday, but the Colombian who won the game, Juan Fernando Quintero, the Colombian who had such a great World Cup.
The languid playmaker, isn't he? Kind of.
Yeah, my favourite. He is exactly what either myself, Dotton, and maybe Gleeson, what we'd all be if we were top-class footballers. We'd all lose focus because we eat too much and get obsessed with music. And that's what Quintero did. And he didn't play a competitive game for Colombia between the two World Cups, between 14 and 18. But I absolutely love watching his football because he just brings clarity.
And also, Tim, one more point, just to you. I imagine you've argued for years about Brazilian goalkeepers. Now we find our state where we've got the two best goalkeepers in the Premiership who are Brazilian. It must be quite a bizarre situation for you.
No, not really, because I think they're very good. I mean, the country that has a problem with goalkeepers is Argentina. I don't know if you saw a couple of weeks ago, there was a brilliant video that from a third division Argentine game, where the ball was goal-bound until this dog arrived and knocked it off the line and made a fantastic save. And I looked at that and I thought, well, maybe that's the future for Argentina. You know, drop their goalkeepers and pick a canine instead. You know, pick a dog in goal because it's a position. It's brilliant, brilliant. But on Brazilian goalkeeping, it's come on in leaps and bounds because of the training methods. And the before and after fella with that is Tafarel, who played three World Cups for Brazil, 90, 94 and 98 with barely a blemish, and he cut the blaze for them in European football. And now, it's over recent years, it's become normal for for Brazil to export goalkeepers to Europe. And they've got two very fine goalkeepers. We're just on the point of playmakers. And Colombia's quite good for this because it's there in the DNA. They've got another one. Well, unfortunately, he missed a vital penalty in the final of the Europa League equivalent, the Copa Sudamericana. It was a vital penalty, and it cost his side the game, Junior of Barranquilla against Atlético Paranense of Brazil. His name is Jarlan Barreira, and he is the second cousin of the great Carlos Valderrama. So that's really running in his veins. And he's left-footed playmaker, and he's just got these angles of his part. He can open up the pitch with imaginative angles. He's either now going to Argentina or Mexico. There's a kind of tug of war going. But he's another one who, like Quintero, they seem to have walked out of the pages of an old-fashioned black and white football annual. So it is still there. The old foot on the ball playmaker is still there. It's hard for them these days because they've been squeezed out of the game a little bit, but you still find them, and when you find them, cherish them because they're a wonderful breed.
Yeah, mate. Thank you.
I agree. The more Pablo Aimar, the better, in my opinion.
Simon, thank you. You need to call up earlier next time before we start running out of time as well, mate. But thank you very much for contributing this morning. Had a couple of texts or tweets here, actually. One from James in Tollsbury who says, I second your thoughts, Dotton. 2 weeks ago, my father suffered a heart attack, and this great show offered me a break from worry. He's now improving and possibly listening in his hospital bed.
Oh, get on.
Yeah.
Get on. Bring it on.
And Mark
Brilliant.
says, World Football Phone-In also helped me through a tough period. I love listening and catching up with familiar voices as well. And not least, the humorous side of things, I imagine. Carl says, what is the most disappointed either of you have ever been by a football match? Mark, go on.
Quite a few, actually. I mean, I've been disappointed, to be honest with you, in a couple of the Nations Cup tournaments that I've been to. The one in Gabon, Equatorial Guinea 2012 was absolute rubbish. The football was dire, the pitches were poor, the quality of player was not all that great. And it was no great advert for the continent at a time when we were really hoping that it would sort of, African football would push on a little bit. But yeah, no, I've had more than my fair share of disappointing football games. But to go through a whole tournament thinking to yourself, no, this is real rubbish. I've spent 3 weeks watching rubbish is not a great feeling.
Tim?
Yeah, well, we are frequently disappointed. There are many games, when they hold up the placard at the end, 4 minutes of stoppage time. And you're thinking, well, why couldn't you take 4 minutes off? Let us home early. Would be much better. But one recent one that really disappointed me was the World Cup, was Colombia against England. Because of Colombia, they were. I admire a lot their then coach, Jose Pekerman. I think he's been a great asset to football, but he does seem to bottle it on the big occasions. And he picked three purely destructive midfielders, and there was that incident when the players coming back into the tunnel at the end of the first half. One of Pekerman's coaching staff went out on the pitch and barged Raheem Sterling. Now, when it's a member of the coaching staff, it's clearly a directive from on high. And Colombia was set up for that game as if they were playing Brazil 1970 and not Gareth Southgate's England. They were capable. I know they didn't have James Rodriguez, who's a star player who really changes the side, but they were capable of so much more than the dismal display. Thank God they lost on penalties. They really didn't deserve to go through. And they could have done so much more. And when teams fail to live up to their potential in that way, that I think that's one of the most disappointing things for me. Yeah,
disappointment of another sort as a supporter. I think the most disappointing I've ever been at a football match was with the Gent, actually. He and I were sitting next to each other at a Charlton game at the Valley. I can't remember if it was against Southampton or if it was Sheffield United. Definitely red and white. And the reason why
disappointment at the Valley must be all too frequent, Dot.
Not as bad as this one. Not as bad as this one. Not as bad as this one. With about 3 minutes to go, we were 1-0 up. And we ended losing 2-1, and it was James Beattie. That's why I can't remember if it was when we were in the Premier League and he was playing for Southampton or whether we'd be relegated. He was playing for Sheffield United. I remember what went well, we went from elation to devastation in about, or disappointment, yeah, is an understatement, but devastation in about the course of about 2 minutes. And I ended up going to his house. I don't even think we talked to each other very much. It was just one of those, let's forget the match. Would you like another biscuit, Dotson? And, well, I stayed for about 3 or 4.
The answer to that one is.
Well, I stayed for about 3 or 4, like I said. And even as I was driving home after midnight, I was thinking, why did I waste my time driving all the way to South? That was a disappointment.
What's important is the emotions that you live through. They're valid.
No, you don't want that.
That's part of it.
Tim, trust me, you don't want that one because there are questions to be answered. How can you lose 2-1 when you're 1-0 up with 3 minutes to go?
But the worst thing is when you feel nothing. Enjoy it. Embrace the disaster.
I felt a bit too much. Tim, thank you very much. Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thanks to all our callers, texters and emails.